My presentation will be considerably different, I think, from the last speaker's, no doubt because my personal history is quite different. And I'm going to tell you a story I've never told before, a story from my childhood, but I think it's probably relevant to the points I'm going to try to develop. And I leave that up to you to see the relevance, so I'll try to point out things along the way. I began my story in my childhood when I'm told by my parents that I was one of these irritating, questioning children to age 3, always asking why. You know, it goes on until the parents think they'll go crazy, and they give them some sort of an answer. Well, I don't remember any of that. 3 was a little too early for my memory to work. But I do remember something that happened when I was either 7 or 8. And I should make the point, because of the question I'm going to raise here, that I did not come from anything that could even remotely be called a scientific background. My ancestors and relatives were farmers, and some of them businessmen, no scientists, no engineers, nothing even remotely resembling that. So whatever questions I raised came from my childishness rather than from my surroundings. This occasion that I remember very well was the occasion of a funeral in the family. I think it was my grandfather who had died, and this was out in the country. We were on a 160-acre ranch, and relatives and a few friends came from considerable distances, and this was in the days of the Model T Ford and muddy roads, and having come that far, they weren't about to go home in a hurry, so many of them stayed around for a week. A little long for guests, but it was all in a good cause because everybody caught up on the gossip. And of course, this being a very sexist world, it divided into 2 camps. The women stayed in the kitchen and in the bedrooms doing the household chores while they caught up with the gossip in their way. The men went hunting. They took the few dogs that were around and their guns and went hunting, and but the talking, it was probably not too different from what it was among the women. I don't know. I was only with the men. But I cannot give you the exact words, but I can certainly give you a feeling for my feelings at that time and how they carried on. I was walking with my father through an abandoned orchard. This was in November or December. There was a light snow on the ground, and the dogs were misbehaving as usual, having to keep them behind the guns, which is always hard, hoping to see a rabbit, and now and then we did see a rabbit. And I was walking with my father, and I, making small talk perhaps, I said, I understand that God made everything and all the people in the world. But what I don't understand is who made God. Now, I don't remember my father's exact words, but I do remember the atmosphere that developed. My father became very angry. I only saw him out of the corner of my eye, but I had the feeling his face was flushed, and he said in a very emotional voice, "That's a question you must never ask." I got the idea. This was taboo. I didn't know the word taboo, but I got the idea. And from that day on, I never asked the question, where did God come from? Who made God? Because I realized you just don't ask that question. And thus, I had to make do with what I could make of my own cogitations. Well, you see, what's involved here is the idea of an infinite regress. You can say somebody else, Zeus made God. Well, who made Zeus? Well, Thor made Zeus. And who made Thor? And you go on back and back and back. But you see, you can never end this infinite regress. So this is no satisfactory, rational answer to a problem, an infinite regress. On the other hand, as a previous speaker pointed out, to get something from nothing is also very disturbing. I found these equally disturbing and never tried to put my money on one or the other. I just felt this was a dead end, and it was largely not. interested in it. The part of the trouble, I think, is moving on to more adult concepts. Whatever one means by God, you don't mean anything as childish as you start out with the idea an old man with a beard. And, of course, nowadays, you wouldn't dare do that anyway because it should be an old woman. But in those days, it just, I thought of it as a person. I couldn't see any evidence for any person that could be called God, and nobody told me any. Nobody volunteered the information, either then or later. What this boils down to is a problem in words and the use of them. And I want to quote to you from a passage from the Bible, which I think is immensely wrong. This is a passage by John, Epistle to the Hebrews, in which he says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." End of quote. Now I want to contrast that with the motto of the Royal Society. This is a Royal Society, essentially it's a scientific society in England. The Royal Society, which was founded in 1660. Their motto is nullius in verba, which is derived from Horace, a poet of the first sentence, and abstracted from a long passage, but the general feeling people agree on, nullius in verba means there's nothing in words. You can't prove anything with words. There's no authority in words. I see that's utterly different from what John was saying, that the Word was God. And this, of course, is absolutely basic to all of science. There's nothing in words. There's something behind the words, which we're trying to get at with words. And sometimes we fail, sometimes we succeed, but it's always questionable. And one of the things we have to accept is that some of the greatest scientists have confessed that they do not work with words, that these come later. These are the window dressing. Niels Bohr, who was the most important personality of the first half of the 20th century in theoretical physics. He inspired so many people. He set them on the right track to making Nobel Prize winners of themselves. When he was approached by a young man named Abraham Pais, Pais reported this contact this way. He said, "The first thing Bohr said to me was that it would be profitable for me to work with him only if I understood that he was a dilettante." He explained how he had to approach every new question from a starting point of total ignorance. Now, you see, this is a great contrast with what one usually thinks of great scholars who approach things with all the knowledge and so forth and so on. And Bohr said, "I'm just a dilettante. I'm just playing around. I don't know." Einstein was approached several times, principally by Hadamard, who wrote a history or a treatise on the use of language in science and how scientists worked. Said, "The words or the language as they are written or spoken do not seem to play any role in my mechanism of thought." That's a pretty extreme statement for a man of Einstein's standing to make. And on another occasion he said, "I very rarely think in words at all. A thought comes and I may try to express it in words afterward." And he said, "The belief of certain people that thinking is always in words made him laugh." This, I think, we should take very seriously, and I think this is a way of operating not only among the giants in science, but also, to a lesser extent, to the extent that they can, among the ordinary foot soldiers, that a great many of them do not operate with words, except at the last moment, so to speak. They're operating with ideas, with visions of movement, of relationships, and so forth and so on. And somewhere along the line, before they can talk to somebody else, they have to put some words to it. And that, of course, is where the trouble may come in. Einstein, by the way, did not speak until he was 3 years old, so he'd ordinarily be classified as a backward child. And at 9, it was recorded that he spoke with great reluctance in class, as though he were thinking a long time before he'd be willing to speak. You see, so this is a deeply ingrained thing. He was not talkative. I find that it helps to think of our way of taking into ourselves the phenomena of the world, that we do this with 3 filters. The first filter is often called the literate filter, or the verbal filter, or the language filter. But let's say literate filter. And this, of course,